Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions proudly presents Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, as told by Andrew Brammer. Hello and welcome. The story you are about to hear is written and told using its original source materials, scribblings and scratchings from the scrawls of Stumpy, found within Stumpy Sanderson's time capsule, which was buried in 1979 and then unearthed in 2019. The story is told in the first person, as I, just like Stumpy, witnessed at first hand the momentous events which it recounts. So let's park up our rally choppers and tomahawks and take a ride back to 1977 for Forever Chambers. Our year group, and particularly our Form 3B, was held in a grip of fear. A reign of terror, ruled over by the iron fists in steel gloves of the Buchanan Gang, subjected to a constant campaign of domination, intimidation, and extortion. For all of us boys, life was a misery, and barely a day went by without some form of outrage perpetrated by this gang. Lunches were swiped, lunch money stolen, homework snatched and copied, games kits vandalised, individuals bullied, subjugated and ridiculed, seemingly without reason. The Buchanan Gang comprised 3 members. Pig Buchanan, a toxic character whose cement complexion accentuated his strange, snout-like nose. Slug Bates, with his ghost-like mannequin face and straw hair. And Peter the Cruel, a horrible ghoul-like creature with dead eyes and tombstone teeth. These individuals had a warped lust for viciousness, and any boy who stepped out of line and crossed them was subjected to any one of a barbaric selection of bizarrely named tortures, in addition to the usual fare of dead legs and Chinese burns. There was Goldfinger, a special summer torture which involved Bates and Peter the Cruel holding you down on the field, pulling your trousers down, and Buchanan applying a magnifying glass to your groin area, scorching the searing laser heat of the sun into your flesh. There was Nettle Wash, for which you had to roll your shirt sleeves up and wash your hands in stinging nettles. And there was Penicillin, the special preserve of Slug Bates, which involved him excruciatingly corkscrewing you just above the temples with his protruding knuckles. So, in the dog-eat-dog world of being a boy in 1970s comprehensive England, the Buchanan Gang was at the very top of the food chain. Until one day, when a campaign of sabotage and subversion suddenly began. For someone began fighting back. A silent, secretive saviour. A superhero who simply became known as the Sparrow. It all started in home economics, which was the posh term for cookery, when we were cooking blackberry crumble. The teacher opened the door of an oven to look in at Buchanan's, Bates and Cruel's offerings, only to be encountered by 3 blackberry-gushing versions of Mount Vesuvius. Someone had put holes in their crumble crusts, ensuring that, when the blackberry jam was piping hot, it gushed geyser-like through the opening. A mysterious calling card on the oven hob simply said, "With regards, the Sparrow." Next, when important English homework essays were handed in, the Buchanan Gang having obviously copied their efforts from others, the gang members were the very next day summoned to the deputy head's office to try to explain how lewd magazine pictures of naked ladies had managed to be stuck in their books after the closing paragraphs of their essays, followed by the words, "With regards, the Sparrow," and then the coup de grace, when the headmaster himself took us for history, and all three members of the Buchanan Gang sat down in synchronicity, and, in synchronicity, released the foul sulphurous stench of stink bombs, for someone had placed these odious devices under their chair legs. At this particular indignity, the gang stood red-faced and bewildered amidst the chaos, while the rest of the class, in between gagging, were doing our best to suppress our laughter, for on the blackboard, behind the headmaster, were written the immortal words, "With regards, the Sparrow." This was the final straw for the Buchanan Gang, and at lunch that day word quickly went round, "All the boys from 3B, up on the field." So, having digested our beef cobbler and the stale stodge of semolina, we headed out into the glare of the sun and trooped up with trepidation to our rendezvous with doom. On the field, we saw Bates, preparing his knuckles for some lethal doses of penicillin. Peter the Cruel, maliciously crushing a can of Cresta, and Buchanan, striding and adopting his best commandant persona. "Every one of you will get a dose of penicillin until one of you squeals as to the identity of the Sparrow." I looked around and saw the terror on everyone's faces. We were all tight-faced and tight-lipped, the faint acrid aroma of adolescent angst hanging in the air. Stumpy Sanderson's scrubbing brush hair seemed to be standing taller. It was at this moment that Paul Chambers stepped forward, a bright, bespectacled, bird-like boy, his chest puffed out with pride. He spoke, albeit with the resonance of a reed warbler, for he was only a small boy. "Leave the others alone, Buchanan. I'm the one you want." We were stunned. For in that supreme moment of self-sacrifice, Chambers had shockingly revealed himself as the Sparrow. But now, full of spirit, strength, and stature, he was no longer a mere sparrow, but instead a mighty sparrowhawk. This brave soul, this unlikely martyr, this poor fool. What followed next was ghastly in its undertaking. First, we were made to sit on the rough parched grass and watch as Chambers was subjected to a quadruple dose of extra strong penicillin. Then, as he lay on the ground, twitching spasmodically, his arms held by Bates, Peter the Cruel went to fetch the caretaker's wheelbarrow, sat Buchanan in it, and with Chambers's legs splayed out, proceeded to wheel the barrow over Chambers's nether regions to the accompaniment of what sounded like the crunching of blackbirds' eggs. Then we sat in silence as Chambers was bound hand and foot, gagged with gaffer tape, and thrown into the 5-foot-high undergrowth of nettles that stood at the side of the field, so that no one looking upon that field would even know he was there. Not once, during this carnival of cruelty, had Chambers screamed or cried out, and not once had any one of us made a move to come to his assistance. Buchanan then made it perfectly clear to the rest of us, "If any of you tell the teachers what has happened, then you too will suffer the same fate." As the bell for afternoon lessons rang out, we headed back, our spirits crushed, our heads hung in shame. Afternoon lessons were endured in a heavy and dreadful silence. The Sparrow was finished. His campaign of defiance now composting amongst the nettles. As the end of day bell sounded, we shuffled out again into the summer sun, living corpses. Our hopes and dreams of rebellion smashed. I walked with Stumpy Sanderson. Ahead of us was the Buchanan Gang. Laughing, joking, gloating. Ahead of the gang, the subway. And there, standing above the subway, a small figure. "Could it be?" I said. "Impossible." Yet for Stumpy and I who had seen him, there could be no mistake. Without a doubt, standing there on the subway bridge was Chambers, risen from his urticaria grave. How had he escaped? We cared not. Then we saw Chambers place 2 buckets on the bridge, and the gang had still not seen him. What was in those buckets? We soon found out. As the Buchanan Gang approached, Chambers shouted, albeit in a voice half an octave higher than normal due to his earlier encounter with the wheelbarrow, "Have some pig swill, Buchanan!" And he proceeded to splatter the gang with a foul-smelling putrid mess which he had procured earlier from the food bins. We and the 50 or so others who had by now seen what was happening couldn't contain ourselves. Everyone cheered and roared with laughter at these stumbling and groping creatures who now looked like some hideous extras from a Quatermass movie. Never had the smell of food bins smelt so much like victory. We never saw Chambers again. He didn't come back for the last week of term, and in the summer, his family moved away. As for Buchanan, he was finished. All his credibility lost as he became known as Pigswill Buchanan. There's an old saying, if you cut off a snake's head, then the body will die. And that's what happened to the Buchanan Gang. For in the following school year, with a new term and newfound courage, thanks to Chambers' example, people began standing up to the gang, and, like summer snow, its members melted away. Recently, there was a school reunion. The morass of nettles on the field is still there, albeit thicker and taller. The subway bridge is still there, and by the bridge stands a small and strange plaque, which reads as follows: "Wherever I may be, think only this of me, that in Dunstable there's some corner of a school field and a subway bridge that are forever Chambers. With regards, the Sparrow." Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And don't forget to listen out for Stumpy and Gang's next adventure. For further information on all things Stumpy Sanderson, please visit www.stumpysanderson.co.uk. And you can also check out the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. But before we saddle up again on our rally choppers and tomahawks, let's take a listen to the strange little song that was specially written by Stumpy to accompany this podcast's tale. This song is performed for us now by Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s acoustic archive. Let's rock! Did I ever tell you about the Sparrow? Thrown into the nettles, there was no way he could survive. But he revived and then he rose again. Like some avenging angel, he was the Sparrow, our superhero, our guiding light. He fought back against the bullies. They no longer looked so tall. He ridiculed and diminished them. He cut them down too small. He was the Sparrow, our superhero, our guiding light. And even though he stood alone in our hour of need, justice did prevail through his heroic deeds. He was the Sparrow, our superhero, our guiding light. And now in his memory there stands that small strange plaque, on which is placed a single flower, a sign of eternal thanks. He was the Sparrow, our superhero, our guiding light. So thrown into the nettles, there was no way he could survive. But he revived and then he rose again. Like some avenging angel, he was the Sparrow, our superhero, our guiding light.